Cool. So welcome. So sounds like a lot of folks were looking at my profile ahead of time, but let me just introduce myself a little bit. I'm been in LA for about 12 years now, doing a number of different startups. Right now I'm a CTO of Retina.AI. We're doing artificial intelligence, for another one of those buzzwords, for marketing analytics. But our web app is written in Vue. I've been a long time, web developer, leading various engineering teams, but switching between a number of different languages and frameworks, going way back. I wrote things in CGI scripts. Not sure if people even know what that is anymore. It's all server-side generated websites. That was way back in the day. Did things with Java. PHP was a big proponent of that. Definitely a lot of server-side things. Let's say about maybe 8 years ago, or 2010, 2011 or so, JavaScript really started, coming back, right? It used to be this thing that always broke. So you wanted to write as little of your code in it as possible because all the browsers were doing things a little crazy. But then jQuery came out. And then finally, everything could actually be written in JavaScript. Who here has written things in jQuery? Oh, wow. Okay, so you're all battle scarred. All right. It was great for the time. Otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do things in JavaScript. So you could change things on the page without a full page refresh, server side. So you wanted to change this one thing over there, you could just go and select that element and go ahead and change it. You could actually build in nice user validation things where based on what people were doing, they were able to immediately see some sort of were they doing it right. You didn't have to get to the end of the form and then hit submit and then figure out that, oh no, I need to fill out all over again. So anyway, so jQuery is great. One of the things I built on top of jQuery, and this was unfortunately proprietary, was a framework on top of jQuery that I think did it right. There's a lot of things where people were doing wrong with jQuery, where you try to select into the DOM and try to store your state in the DOM and do all sorts of wonky things like that, non-unidirectional flow. But definitely having a controlled event loop, having things be declarative within the HTML itself, writing HTML in HTML. That's what this framework did. It was specifically for lead generation. You would end up with a single page app that would show you one page, you get validated, put some inputs, show you another page, that sort of thing. Anyways, that was great. And then I discovered Angular. Angular is wow, I don't need to build this thing myself, right? It's actually a single page app that can actually manipulate all this stuff. Angular has been a great great time saver, great productivity thing. I think for a lot of the folks in the room I saw who raised their hands about it earlier, it had a steep learning curve, and there's definitely some abstractions that it's easy to get wrong, but a really powerful language. Then came along React, right? Sort of jumped on board with that as well, getting it so you get some performance, actually. We had some large pages that had lots of reports and lots of information on it, and they get pretty slow. This is, again, some past companies. So React actually helped to inject a lot of performance on there, make it a lot simpler to do that application. And in the same space, kind of started doing things in Node on the back end to try to get the same that we were doing in the front end in the back. Doing a bunch in Python. Current company's doing a lot of things in R. I do a whole bunch of different languages. I feel like you should use the right one for the right tool, and we can geek out later if people really want to about different types of ones that are doing different things. I'm also a big fan of Typescript as well. In the right context, it can bring a lot of efficiencies to how you're coding. But anyways, then I discovered Vue a little more than a year ago. It's kind of looking at it with my previous company as something we might switch to, and then I ended up founding my current company and kind of jumped whole hog into the whole thing. And it's been really great ever since. Cool. So what is Vue? Why is all this hype, right? So it's actually been getting a lot of popularity. You'd see actually that it's just sort of neck and neck with React these days in terms of GitHub stars. Angular sort of forked itself or whatever they did, so like there are things that got distributed. But it got really popular in 2017, the beginning of the year there. That's when like things really took off. 2016 is when the Laravel community picked it up as their dedicated front end. But Vue, it was created not out of one of the big tech companies. Evan You, who created Vue, was a former Googler, but he wasn't at Google when he was doing it. The idea is that rather than, say, Facebook's doing React or Google doing Angular, it started from the beginning as a community effort. And even though it's gotten corporate sponsorship since then, so Alibaba and Baidu are actually paying some of Evan You's salary in order to have him kind of work on that. It's been adopted by like Adobe and IBM and various larger tech companies. So what is Vue? Well, it's a view. Oh, obviously, done. We're done. All right. It's a view layer. And so it fits in the same space where React does, right? And where Angular 2 and above is trying to be, although it's wiring up a bunch of other things in addition to that. And so the idea is that it's about everything that you do that's interacting with what people are seeing on their screen, right? How it appears there in a nice unidirectional flow. You start from just one place and you control everything that's going on the screen. You have a nice standard way of handling user interactions, different events that they might do, click events, touchscreen events, all that sort of thing. So starting after React, Vue was also able to take advantage of a lot of the lessons learned from React. So we got things like the virtual DOM. So the virtual DOM is what makes these single-page apps a lot faster than they used to be. For all the folks in the room who were jQuery developers, imagine you had a whole list of like 500 items, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, you wanted to change the color of all of them or something. You might need to go and select each one of them and change the color on all of it. And you have to figure out how to do that. Or you might end up destroying all the elements and then recreating them all over again. The browser doesn't like that sort of thing. It's kind of heavyweight to change things and create and destroy all sorts of DOM elements, especially select them all the time. So a virtual DOM helps to make that a lot faster by maintaining a model of what is there, and then it only changes what it needs to do to get where it's going to go. This is definitely what came out of React, and Vue just jumped wholeheartedly into that. It also did it in a universal app style. So the idea is that you're able to do server-side rendering of your HTML just as you do in the browser. So it's sort of what everyone assumes these days in their Angular 4 or 5 or their React 16 or whatnot. But it definitely was an innovation at the time, and it's helped people to do build workflows where, say, your HTML is generated via node code, like taking in some state, generating that, and outputting it as a template. You can even send it completely non-web related. We generated like some emails using Node in the past for some other companies. So just no browsers involved. So it helps with testing. It helps with, of course, universal apps. A universal app being something where you write your pages and they render sometimes on the server, so that what gets shipped to the user is HTML, and that renders as fast as possible. Or things which are rendered within the browser, so that the users has as fast and as responsive an experience as possible. Cool. So so that's how it gets fast. I mentioned the simple. One-way data flow would be something where you're trying to control something on a website, and you're trying to specify, let's see, these list of items on the website, right? And then you have some reason to reorder them. You want to sort them in some different order, for example, or you want to add an element in the middle, right? What you could definitely do is get rid of all of them and just regenerate it all from your data, but that would be expensive. So what you'd rather do is you'd rather go through the Vue layer and say, like, here's my data. I just mutated my data, and Vue will just take care of making it look the way it's supposed to look. So, is that, you guys have all dealt with this sort of thing before, I think? Some of you? All right. HTML-like templates. This is the thing that really everyone who's coming from React really loves about Vue, at least the ones who maybe were always a little bit uncomfortable with JSX files. I've never really, never sat well with me to write your HTML in JavaScript and have to do things like not have your for, in a label, like label for something or other, not actually refer to that because, well, for is a keyword in JavaScript, so you can't do that. It always seemed wrong to mix one language with the other language. Being someone who is like, learned a number of different languages, I like HTML to be HTML, JavaScript to be JavaScript, that sort of thing. It's just a clear way of thinking about it. So I've been blabbing for a little bit. Let's look at some code here. So this is an example of a Vue app. What it's doing here is it's making this thing on the bottom here where you can start changing that and you can save it and do that sort of thing. So this is just on JS Fiddle. Do note this is on an earlier version of Vue, but it kind of deconstructs it a bit, so I think it makes it a little bit easier for people to see. And it wasn't me, it was this guy. Anyways, so let's talk about what you're seeing here. So in the Vue component here, so this is a Vue template. I mentioned it looks just like HTML. What makes this magic here is this ID, the app ID here. That's the reference that, in this case, Vue 1 is hooking into, and it's hooking into that element. And thus, everything inside of that div is now controlled by Vue. The other thing we're doing here is we're defining a new component within Vue. And so a component is the HTML and the JavaScript that makes it do its thing all together. And so that's what's going on here. This is the template ID item edit. And this is just one of these little lines here. The idea is it has some sort of list item that it's displaying. You see in that span. Oh, yeah. And the actual part which is being displayed is the item.name, right? So each item is being output there. One can do nice little filters as well, sort of like my filter or whatnot at that point in order to transform it. Okay. So, and what you're seeing here is you're seeing, sorry, this is an older Vue syntax here, V show. You could do a V if, V else sort of thing. But the idea is you're only showing this particular span if that property in edit is not true, right? And the other one, if it is true, then you're going to show an edit screen. So this is in edit, this is true, and then now it's false. Cool. So that's the idea of it being unidirectional. The idea is that the templates are just listening to some state, and you're just changing the state. You're not looking at all the things that are listening to it. So you can generate additional items that we're looking for in edit, and whatever was modifying in edit didn't have to worry about that. Great. So now we have here, we're getting to the actual click handler. And so that's what's actually showing is either the save or edit link that we're doing. So the idea is that it's, okay, so this is connecting into the click handler in JavaScript, the @click. You guys see that? Oh, there we go. Cool, awesome. All coding should be done in the dark, I guess. Is that the?
Just debugging.
All right, cool. So, and what it's doing here is so it's preventing the default thing that you normally do with a link. Normally, when there's a link, it would try to navigate, but it's disabling it here. And the idea is it's calling this toggle handler. And so in our Vue component, we have a toggle method. And what that's doing is it's just, toggling the in-edit state. So that's exactly what's going on here whenever I click one of these. it's toggling each one of them. Notice that each one of them has its own separate state. That's actually what's being defined here in the data attribute. These are the data for that component. And it's just a single Boolean, which starts off false. And so Vue Components. All right. So Vue Components are a nice Vue innovation where they do exactly, every web developer knows those three things: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So why not put it all together and make it something that's part of your Vue framework? Because they all affect it in different ways, right? The idea in Vue is that you can combine all of them into a single .vue file. That might get some folks who have been maybe used to having their CSS be all separate in a separate file feel a little nervous because you start worrying about you're repeating yourself, right? But actually what you're doing is repeating that component all over the place, and it can maintain its own styles however it wants to. In the React community, and now with some later Angular things, they've been adopting up components as well. Some of the things that's happening with Vue is they're hooking this up with the web component standard so that then one can take a standard web component and bring it in as a Vue component and vice versa. It's not quite that smooth yet, but it's headed there. So great. So what you can also do with a Vue component is you'll be leveraging those preprocessors. So in the time between when React and Angular were first made, this whole ecosystem of preprocessors has sprung up, starting with, say, Gulp, right? Even older, there were some other things, but Gulp is when it got easy. And then Webpack, now there's Rollup and other sort of preprocessors. The idea is you're not writing in the code which is executing in the browser anymore. And so you can be a lot freer to have your code be structured the way that you want to think about it. And that's why there's no such thing as running a .vue file just straight loading in your browser, right? It's just source. It's not actually the executable code. So we do lose a little bit of that, but there's a nice set of debuggers and tools for stepping through things that it doesn't tend to be a problem. React and Angular, by the way, these days do the same thing. All modern sort of web development runs through some sort of preprocessor. That's how you have Typescript and whole new languages that are created. Or people are writing in ES6, even though the browsers don't support it, or some of the browsers don't support it. So, cool. So we were just looking a little bit at the HTML templates. There's a whole lot of other directives that it has. The things that were their vshow and whatnot, those are actually what Vue calls directives, and that's very analogous to an Angular directive. The idea is it's an extra little bit of control that you're attaching onto the different elements that you're doing. You can attach different things onto it in different ways. And what you end up getting is super powered HTML. You start with HTML, and then you add this extra little things on it, and all of a sudden it does more, right? Just like we're showing that example a little bit ago, you can add that @click.prevent, and all of a sudden you're hooking into the click handler. You could add a little more code there as well if you really wanted to get a little more elaborate. Certainly, as a best practice, you shouldn't be writing all your JavaScript in your HTML all over again, because then you're kind of breaking things all over again. But it's very easy and very powerful to do and to superpower your HTML using these Vue templates. So great. I will mention that because Vue has decoupled it, if people want to, they don't have to use Vue templates to use Vue. So if you're already hooking up your whole application to be Vue, and then you bring on your React developer who's just gung-ho about JSX and has to write JSX, they can write JSX and it can run in Vue. They can write a render function and it can run in Vue. You could write Pug, formerly Jade, and run it in Vue. So the idea is that via the power of these preprocessors and the fact that it's hooked in pretty deeply with them, anything that has a preprocessor in Webpack, you can run in a Vue component. That's on the HTML side. On the CSS side, the same thing happens. So you can run your CSS and you just call it a style tag, and you put your CSS in there and you're good to go. But people have been getting a lot more mileage off of CSS preprocessors these days. Especially if you're going to do like nested things, or you're going to do a transform, or you want to find some sort of variables like that set like the main colors of your site, or how you want to set up your padding and your spacing and your grid system and all that magic that happens because you're using a CSS preprocessor. You can do that in Vue. In fact, you can use it a little bit here and a little bit there, and you can use your CSS here, and you can use your post CSS there, and then, oh, well, you happen to hook into this library that's using less, so you can hook into your less there. Mix and match, because it's all hooked in to these preprocessors. One thing that Vue does that is new on the CSS side is using component scoped styles. And so the idea there is that in your single Vue file, you can actually, where you have your HTML and you have your CSS all in that same file, if you add the scoped keyword onto your style, Vue will make sure that that style only applies to the elements in that particular component. So then you don't have to have really, really, really long names just to like reselect the thing you're looking at again. This is like BEM and whatnot. Like, I'm a fan of those as far as like clarity. But imagine you didn't have component scoped CSS. You just had your CSS file, and then you had a whole web app over here. In order for this style to refer to this element, it has to have sort of a globally unique name. And there's all sort of like, rigmarole that has to happen in order to do that. Well, why not just put them together in the same file, and you just say scoped, and that style applies to that element, and you're done. So it does some magic by adding on some extra like pseudo IDs and things like that to make that happen. But it's pretty nice when it does work there, as far as you can make use of it very easily, and mostly just kind of gets out of your way. One thing, if you are using a component scope styles, that's a little bit of a gotcha, is it can become a performance issue if you're attaching it to just the type of element, like all your anchor tags or all your LI elements or something. You should attach it to classes and not to elements. That it works better in the browser that way, just due to the way that browsers run CSS. Lastly, so the last bit is, of course, the JavaScript. Because you're running it through a preprocessor anyways, in order to combine your JavaScript, your HTML, and your CSS, you can basically do all the JavaScript things. So you can run ES7. You can run Typescript. One of the big advances that's been happening in Vue, like in the latest versions, is they've been adding Typescript types. So the idea is that native Vue components and Vue code will actually have TypeScript types, so you get the auto-completion and the validation and all the power of TypeScript as you're writing your Vue code. And just like in the HTML and the CSS, you can mix and match, right? You can write this one component, and it can be in TypeScript, and this other one can be in AS6, and the other one can be in AS5. Wouldn't recommend you do that, but if you really want to, you can do that. All right. Other things here. So the batteries are all included. So because Vue sits in the same place that React did, just at the Vue layer, it's taken all the different battle scars that React learned and just basically copied them. Just wholeheartedly just copied it. So basically, if you can do something in React, you can do it in Vue. And so one of the big things that came out of React, was the Flux-related libraries for maintaining state, right? Imagine you have a whole tree of different elements that are going down, and you're trying to have one element on like the right side of the page here, or left side of the page for you, alter something that's going over here. Well, you might have to store it at the top and kind of like have both of them pass it all the way down through the DOM hierarchy. And that could get pretty clunky. So one of the things that a Flux sort of thing can do is, instead of trying to pass everything in properties, you can have sort of a globally shared state. And the idea is just a single way of transforming it, a single source of truth, a single place of reading from truth as to what is going on in your app. And so what happened in the React world was that after they came out with that Flux, then people were like, well, we like that, but it has some rough edges, so we redid it in Redux. And then other folks kind of started, there's like dozens of them now, as far as different like Flux clones and different spins on it or whatnot. It's been nice that in Vue, there's basically one that everyone uses because it's the officially endorsed one, Vuex. And so it's really powerful in that it takes a lot of the same features that you've gotten out of Redux. You can, for example, namespace your different states. You can attach your different getters and setters and be able to like, make things like fully modular. It also hooks into debugging tools. So there's also official Vuex Vue dev tools, and those will hook into the Vuex data stores, so you can see them, you can see it how it's changing, and I'll show you that too in a little bit here. So great, that's your store, and you have a Vue. You have another important thing, which is like what controls all of that, what actually executes all that code, and figure out what components to load and all that sort of thing. That's your router, right? So the router goes from the URL or basically external state of the world and figures out like what you should be doing at that point. And so there's an official router for Vue, and that's the Vue router. Great. Everyone just uses that. It's really powerful. It does all the things that you would get out of the React world, and just does it one way, and you don't need to worry about it being reinvented every 3 months or something. It's just the one way that they're doing it in Vue. In addition, there's a whole ecosystem of other packages. So I was mentioning a little bit ago that there's the site AwesomeView. If I was going to do this, basically, here. Yeah. So you want to do your data table, like pick how you want to do your data tables. You want to do your notifications, you do how you want to do your notifications. You want to do progress loaders. Great. Take your pick your poison. Basically, anytime somebody was doing something in React, they tended to be like, oh, well, let's just do this in Vue too. And it's easy to do that because, again, they sit at the same layer and they're able to do it. But what you're getting out of all of these is you're getting all the simplicity and the build things that Vue does as well. Yeah, I mean, you want to do your icon sets, whatever you want to do. Your validation models, your basically whatever the heck. We're using some things for graphing, for example. We're using HighCharts. It's a nice Vue HighCharts plugin. That's great. You want to do GraphQL. Great, you do Vue GraphQL, and there's it's all hooked up and loading. All the things that people are doing in the React world, and they just come right on over to Vue. So, all right, I think folks get the idea there. It's like tons. Let's see. Cool. Editor support, actually, here, I'm going to mention that too. So I actually use Atom, but other people use other things. All the modern and well-supported editors have Vue support as well. Even old Emacs users. All right. Anyways, all right. So yeah, the idea is, I mean, it's the power of open source, of course, right? And so you get all the syntax highlighting, you'll get autocomplete, all the goodness you get out of in IDE, nicely supported in Vue. So great. All right. So some of my favorite packages, before we dive into code here, is Nuxt.js. And I've been, it's one of the, even though it was a little hairy when I started using it, I jumped in early and been getting a lot of mileage out of Nuxt. Nuxt is a Vue clone of a React framework called Next, because it was React, so they stole it, made it into Vue. And what it does is it handles all the Webpack stuff that for you. which can otherwise get a little bit hairy when you're doing something that has to be compiled the way that Vue does. And so you get all these sensible defaults. It just sort of works out of the box. But you can also go and modify things if you really want your Webpack build to work this way, and you prefer this minifier and not that one, and you really want tree shaking or whatever the heck, you can do it that way. You also get all those things that everybody's been loving in the React world, like hot module reloading. You edit your code, you hit save, and then bam, your page is loaded and showing that as well. You get server-side rendering and universal apps. So if you're writing a page that's actually performance sensitive, you can actually have your what's first served be the HTML, and that's actually rendering the actual content to let the browser go and do its thing, load images, all that sort of thing. And then afterwards, it can asynchronously load all the JavaScript so that any subsequent page transitions are just single page transitions. So it doesn't have to go back to the server in order to just navigate to another page. Some of the recent things they've been adding is a static site generator. I think everyone who has a blog or instead of using WordPress, which is hacked every other second, you should write a static site and have it just serve HTML and JavaScript and CSS and not be hackable in that sense anyways. So the idea is you can write your pages as a Vue app, and then you just tell Nuxt generate, and it will output static files. You just like send those up or hook it into a CI/CD pipeline or whatever you want to do, and it will go ahead and load that quickly. I'll show you guys an example in a bit. Last thing about Nuxt is what it does as part of making it simpler is it handles a lot of the routing for you. I really like this style where really there's like two maps that you're kind of doing as you're writing a web app, like two like tree structures you're doing. One of them is the URL structure of your site. Hopefully you have a sensible URL structure such that somebody could actually bookmark your pages. You're not just single page apping it all so that like they're like deep in your app and they hit bookmark and then they go back to it and they just end up at the front page again, right? So if you have some sort of structure to your URLs, you're also doing things to your components and how you handle the routing. And ideally these two sort of like go the same way. Well, Nuxt just makes that simpler. The idea is you place a file in a folder, and you have the folder called, I don't know, blog posts, right? And then you have your file within it, might be underscore id.vue. And the idea is that then that will generate a URL that can be blog/5/10/ whatever it is. And it can be dynamically routed based on the URL to that particular Vue page, and it just all works. I'll show that to you in just 1 second as I, actually, yeah, let me do that now. All right. So let's start here. This is the way that Nuxt works is just like how some of the highly opinionated web frameworks have been working, is that certain directories have certain meanings, and you just always use those directories for their meanings. And thus, if you're picking up one project and going to another project, it's pretty easy to tell that your pages are in the pages folder, and that's where the pages are, rather than in source modules, I don't know, whatever, or something. Yeah. So, oh yeah, putting your source in dist, because that's wonderful. Anyways, okay. So here we have a Vue app. You see the top here. This is the template. This is the HTML, as you can tell. This is, what is this? This is the CSS? No, it's not the CSS. This is the JavaScript part, and it's in a script tag. That's really nice. And then there's no CSS part to this, but if there was, you would just put that in the style tag, and you're off and running. Okay, great. So the idea here is that just by putting things in these different folders, it's automatically setting up the URL routes for that. So let's do that. So it is, it's running Webpack, and like Nuxt is actually compiling it and running it, and now running a little bit of a local server in order to host this page. But kind of handled that all for me. And this is the page loading in dev mode right now. So great, here's the page. If, let's see, if we're looking at this, what's actually happening is, oh, interesting. Okay, we can't make that go away. All right, great. So what's loading with all of this, right, is, here, let me navigate to another page. So I go to the About page, and you notice that what happened was it didn't actually have to go back to the server to do a whole page refresh. This is a single page transition. So it's a faster experience for your users. It's all happening just within the browser. Great. Let's see some of the other things you can do here, which I don't remember if the, oh yeah, great. So here you can see the state, and you can be incrementing it, and all of that's hooking into the Vue debugger here. We'll go into the code in just a little bit here, but you can see that it's going ahead and changing that. And you get like time travel here, so you can even go back and see, if you kind of undo some of these, like what was going on, and it kind of goes back. It's a nice, fun little dev tool for Vue. Alrighty, so let's get back into the app itself here. So you're just looking at it, but let's maybe try that handle increment part, because it's kind of more interesting when you're doing something in the app, right? That is calling this method here, handle increment, and what it's doing is it's editing the Vuex store and telling it to increment the counter. And then the Vuex store in Nuxt style is in, well, the store, because where else should stores be but in the store folder. And the store stores all of your global state. In this case, it starts off the counter at 1. And the idea is there's an increment counter there, and that's basically the main thing there. The other things that this store is using is it's holding some other information here. That's another part of the app. We can get into that. Yeah, this is Vuex. This is all you kind of really need to do. Yeah. Vuex. That one. Okay, this one. All right, awesome. They have a nice picture. I was just trying to get to the picture. All right. Normally, when you just have a simple sort of like app thing, right, you have your actions, just mutate the state in one way, and that changes the view. But you might want to get a little more complicated, because your single page app doesn't just like take inputs from the user. It might get it from the backend database. You want to plug in a debugger, that sort of thing. The idea, though, is that there's just a single way that this is all flowing, unidirectional flow. You don't go from your actions back directly to edit the components. You rely on the actions to go all the way through to the state, and the state to then change the components themselves, that sort of thing. jQuery world, you would have some little jQuery method that goes and directly edits things. Don't do that. You can then you can hook your dev tools, as I mentioned, like the Vue debugger, into all those mutations and see all the different changes that occur to your state. You can also see your state at that point. Yeah, that's the basic idea of Vuex. This is like the flux diagram as well, right? Cool. Alrighty, so let's see other things about the. Oh yeah, so here, this is all you really need to do. So let's see here, JSLA.view. So I'm just going to make a new page here. Great. So we'll call it a template and div and hello. Great. And then I can go back to my app, which was, oh, I just killed it. Sorry. It's not happy with me. What was I doing? Was I writing some code on some? Well, let me read the error message. JSLA.view. Oh, that. There. Okay. Now it's recompiling that, and it's happy. Should be happy. Great. Let's go to that. Go to JSLA. And there, great. We have a web page. Awesome. That was really fast. And all it says is hello. But the idea is that in order to add something new to your route or whatnot, it's just as easy as that. You can then generate other things like, as I mentioned, like blogs, and call this, say, id.view, and the fact that there's an underscore there. Let's see. Okay, great means that, okay, no errors, great. So what I could do is go to blogs and something, and all of a sudden, great, it's routing to that. In the actual JavaScript part, we would get past the params here, which is actually the ID value, and be able to then maybe do a database request and whatnot, or actually load the proper blog at that point. Yeah, or questions? Yes?
How is that signified? It's just the fact that there's an underscore and it
Yeah.
knows what to do?
Yep. Just because there's an underscore there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but anyways, yeah. So if you're starting off and writing Vue, it's they're still adding to it, but one of the things that's actually been really great about Vue is that, and this just comes in part just from the way of thinking of its original creator, is everything's really well documented. So if you have a question or something, you can actually go to the Vue website, and 9 times out of 10, the answer to your questions is right there, nicely documented with examples and all that. So yeah, that's been something just from the get-go that makes it really easy to adopt Vue. Cool. Let's see, how are we doing on time here? Oh, I'm going really, all right. So let's see, that was next. I mentioned Beautify is some of the things that we're using here. It's a nice front-end framework. Again, comes with sort of like batteries included for all sorts of components that you might want in order to put on your site and have it all be material design friendly. Since you're writing a bit of an enterprise app, it makes it easy to kind of like just implement things and get it done. Beautify is one of the more popular material design frameworks on Vue. So if you were to do it that way, you could also write your Bootstrap, or you write your whatever you want to do, all on top of Vue. Yeah, but I've been using this one, and it works quite nicely. Also, like Nuxt, it's all post 1.0, so they at least are promising stability on that. Okay, great. This one, I made this, and I'm actually kind of a fan of it. Just as an aside, I mentioned I do lots of other things besides web dev, DevOps being one of them. And as much as I love Linux, I don't necessarily love SSHing into lots of servers and doing servery things all the time when I'm just trying to write my web app. So serverless has been a great trend that's been going on in the industry in the past 2 years or so, where you just write your code, and your code runs in the cloud, and the cloud takes care of it and does all the things it needs to do to make that happen. For example, on a website, if you have your website running via serverless, and you all of a sudden have much higher spikes in load, it just starts running more of your functions, because your website's just a function to say how it should render the page. And then it will scale down to 0 if you have no traffic, and they're not charging you for that anyways. So you have high availability, you have high scalability, and you have much more efficient cost than just like running a bunch of servers just sitting there idle all the time. So one of the things that I did was kind of like hook it all together. So I have a serverless running Express inside of AWS Lambda, and Express is running Nuxt, and then Nuxt is running whatever the Vue stuff that we want to do at that point. And so I have a universal app. I have something that like has a nice local dev experience, because Nuxt does that for you. You just saw that a little bit ago, where like all of a sudden you get the hot reloading, and you get like dev tools hooking into it and all that sort of stuff. And when I hit deploy, it goes into the cloud, and there's no like Linux patching to do and that sort of thing. It's just running. So there were some tricky bits, and I figured out some tricky bits, and that's why I made the package. Okay, sorry guys. Can you read that? Yeah, so on the left here, this is the Nuxt folder structure, with pages and whatnot at that point. Oh, actually.
Is it the package JSON looks like?
Sorry?
Your package JSON?
Package.
Is there
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the template.
Right.
This is a Vue CLI template where it gets substituted. But what were you? Okay. But the idea is definitely, because Nuxt is a universal app, some of it runs on the server and some of it runs on the client. So you need to make sure you're running libraries that support that. So for example, you're going to make an HTTP request. You might not have a window object on Node. So how do you, do all of that? You might use a library like Axios is the most common one. It's actually been bundled into the latest versions of Nuxt. Axios makes you make HTTP calls to other, like a backend or whatnot, and do so easily. Let me just actually, oh yeah, here. I'm actually plugging into Axios at this point, and then having Axios go ahead and make a GET request to its backend, and then it's returning that as data. So I didn't go over previously in a Vue component how you handle like an asynchronous request or handle like data that's not coming literally from the page at that moment. There's another way we can do it where there's a bit of a state of the page that's happening here. It's the message value here. And Nuxt is looking for the async data, and it's waiting for the async data to come back before it starts displaying the page to you. And what we'll then do is then populate the message with whatever came back from the back end, and the message is then being showed in that component. So because we're using Axios, this same code will sometimes execute in the back end and sometimes execute in the front end, and the page doesn't care or know the difference. There is a difference in the perfect Paka, though, as to why you would, sometimes you need to store secrets, like your database password or something, right? And you don't necessarily want to put that in the front end. So you need a back end that is just back end. And so, so that's what this is. This is what's actually an express router that's actually just handling that particular route and outputting that one particular output. And it could have, for example, pulled that out of the database in order to return it, or whatever you wanted to do using Node. It's getting a little bit far afield from our Vue world a little bit, but something that I'm using a variant of this like in production in our stuff, and it's working well. There again were some gotchas, so making the framework to help to work around some of the gotchas. Cool. Awesome. So there's that. Other things was, when you can build it into a CI/CD pipeline, you just have the Nuxt build itself in its precompiled form, and then you tell serverless to go and deploy it into the cloud, and then we can run tests in between and whatever you want to do, and just have it all automated. And because it's all handled in this case by Amazon, you can hook in very easily to things like CloudFront, so you get DDoS protection, or like Edge, sort of like caching and faster page loads, SSL, resolution. You can put their web application firewall in front of it if you really want to get paranoid about blocking traffic from here and not there, and that sort of thing. Anyways, you can write enterprise apps using this stuff. It's cool. All right. Last bit here. Cool. So I mentioned there's a official Vue site with a style guide. AwesomeView is basically, if you saw something interesting here, it's probably linked to from AwesomeView because that's the name. And some other things that it links to, but I just want to mention is the end of this month, VueConf US. The first one in the US is being held in New Orleans. There's been some Vue conferences in the past, but they were held in like Norwegian countries and other places. I will mention actually that Vue is actually very international. Because it started off with strong Chinese connections, because again, Evan Yu, its creator, is bilingual, so is able to speak and write in Chinese. So that's why you would get Alibaba and Baidu sort of buying on, but it's been picking up in some like European countries quite a bit, If you do a nice little like Google Trends search map, you see it popping up all over the world. Unlike where the US where it tends to be bigger on, let's say, React or something like that. So, cool. And yes, I am the organizer for the LA Vue.js meetup. So what I did when I was jumping into things is like, well, I want to talk to other Vue developers, and I didn't know too many of them, so I was looking for a meetup, didn't find one, so I made one. And so I've been running that for about a year now. And we meet alternately. We meet every month and alternate between on the west side and in downtown LA. I have a co-organizer who runs a space out of LA, and she'll help to organize that one. And yeah, you can find us on meetup.com. So that's the last bits, and that's me. So thanks, guys.
I'm VJ. Thanks for coming to the meetup today. I'm the organizer for JavaScriptLA. I wanted to just personally thank you for watching this video. If you found it useful, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. We're slowly but surely making lots of little video content for you guys to enjoy and soak up, especially if you want to get better at programming. I'd love for you to be on our Slack channel too. Over 800 users. The link is right here, jsjoin, jsjo.in. If you forget, it's really simple. If you have questions for this meetup, or questions you didn't get to ask, or because you couldn't make it, we'd love to have you just post it in our Slack group. So if you're a newbie, don't worry. It's a good place to go. There's a lot of great engineers all connected around LA and Orange County, so I hope to see you there.